I'm Lynn Creighton. I'm a sculptor. I'm here today to talk to you about what I've discovered as a sculptor. Now, when I finished graduate school, I didn't feel ready to call myself an artist, and I was seeing artwork that I thought was really, really awful, stupid. And so I kind of challenged myself to be informed, to be an informed human being before I called myself an artist. And I met a Native American medicine man and began to work with him as an apprentice, and which I did for 10 years. I was an apprentice, and in the transformational ceremonial work of the Native Americans. And that's really where I began to understand what I was living for, who I was, and what I was meant to do. Now, I led the Native American Purification Lodges for 20 years, more than 20 years. And in that process, I encountered women praying again and again for relief from the trauma of abuse, sexual abuse. And that became the issue that I was connected to. I felt the need to understand the reason for that abuse and to stand as a sensitive support for women who had been abused in that way. I started by going into my studio, and what happened in the clay was an antidote to the trauma women were experiencing and praying about in the lodge. So you'll see, now I've done hundreds of these figures, but here's Orchid. Can you see her? For me, these figures are about women celebrating the truth of their own energy. And this is Inanna. Kelly says she can put some more images on near the end of this video. Well, I set out in search of the reason why, what happened. Why are women traumatized around this beautiful reality of sexuality? I wanted to read you this poem because I already knew, I had discovered that life is meant to be a celebration. And out on a bike ride recently, this poem came to me. Pure white clouds sail across the blue sky. Sun warms the breeze and touches the soul with the truth of our physical world. Luscious greens of trees and shrubs and fields radiate life. Bobbing flower heads and grasses flash their greeting. The sea crashes in joy upon arrival at this distant shore. Birds sing and dart about in the pleasure of life. Tiny baby lizards skitter across the path. Rabbits stand at attention, prepared to turn and dash into their holes. A toddler hides with glee behind a telephone pole. His parents share the delight of the moment. These are jewels of recognition that life is a celebration. Observing the stress of women in the lodge, the purification lodges, I knew I had to find out what had happened, why that was true. And I began to investigate through archaeologists, anthropologists. I inquired of Marija Gimbutus and Riane Eisler, Merlin Stone, Wilhelm Reich, Naomi, what's her last name? I forget her last name right now. Anyway, what I discovered was that there was a reason why women's sexuality had been was impaired in our culture at this time. And it goes back 5,000 years. 5,000 years ago, the Indo-Europeans invaded the goddess-worshipping cultures in the fertile crescent of the Mediterranean. They came in hordes over the Caucasus and overran the goddess-worshipping cultures. The leaders of those invaders, those terrorizers, discovered that their followers were participating in these sacred sexual ceremonies in the goddess worshipping temples. And when that was known, the leaders declared that women's sexuality was evil, that women were sinful, and that they would no longer be allowed to be sexual, except with their husbands. Because as long as the men were still participating in the goddess worshipping temples with the sacred sexuality, the children were being born in the temple, and there was no way of identifying who the father was. With these decrees by the leaders of the invading forces, it was now possible to determine who the father was and to make a legitimate bequeath of his wealth to his known son. Women became the property of their husbands so that the husband would know who their sons were, so that the wealth of that family could continue to accrue. The wealth, the power, the status of that family would continue to grow. And that was at the expense of the sacredness of sexuality, which for the ensuing 5,000 years has been endangered or restricted. I'm telling this story because I believe that knowing the truth, that there was a purposeful intervention in the natural celebration of sexuality, and that women had been given to their husbands as their husband's property. I believe that knowing this reality sets us free to retrieve sexuality as a jewel that we offer to each other, to ourselves, to life itself.